Hello, yet again. Happy Tuesday, everyone. All right, we'll get right into this so I can get breakfast and go take a nap. Well, maybe not take a nap. I need to work on homework. But anyway, so with all the stuff that's been going around between Martin Luther King Jr. Day and the talk about the filibuster being racist, I wanted to spend a little bit of time, do a little bit of research, because again, you've probably heard that because Republicans and two Democrat senators do not want to repeal the filibuster, which would allow Democrats to pass two pieces of voting rights legislation. There's been everything from, the people who don't want to kill the filibuster are racist, to call, comparisons to Jim Crow 2.0, all this stuff about how not passing the voters' right legislation bills, it is a bad thing. You must want to pass it if you value people of color in this country, right? So I decided to, I went on to NPR, because admittedly a lot of conservative outlets are just saying, oh, the voting rights legislation is bad. And that's a lot of the commentary that's behind it. So I actually went to NPR, which is center to center left, and they had a little bit of a breakdown of two pieces, the two bills that are in front that are, well, not really being passed at this point, but this is what the hubbub is about. So, first one is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Now, I won't bury the lead, but I'll just say that I don't know if advancement is the right word, but here we go. So what it essentially boils down to, and this is kind of paraphrasing from NPR, states with a history of voting rights discrimination have to get pre-clearance from the Department of Justice for any changes that they enact to their voting rights laws. Well, that right there just kind of sends, I don't know about you, but that has more red flags than a Chinese New Year's parade. The same organization which we found out from emails conspired to label parents in Loudoun County as domestic terrorists wants to have the ability to pre-clear any state's elections or voting laws changes. Why? What trouble could we possibly get into there? Letting the federal government dictate to states as to how they change their laws. Well, and of course the other thing is states with a history of voting rights discrimination, which on the surface would seem to call out most southern states, many of whom are red states. But I seem to recall many other states historically having history of discrimination as well, even many northern states, many states that are blue. So, okay, what's that going to mean? Also, the bill has to do with, needing pre-clearance to move polling places and pre-clearance for voter ID requirements. Again, pre-clearance by the Department of Justice, which again, I would come back to the point that, number one, why do we want the Department of Justice dictating the states what they can and cannot do? Now, I understand if the states are being annoying bastards and they're doing weird things, yeah, there should be a lawsuit. The Department of Justice should look into it. But that's a big difference from pre-clearance. I would also point out the irony that the Department of Justice wants to examine or pre-clear voter ID requirements when you need ID in order to pair that up with your vaccine passports in order to have 5-year-olds get into restaurants in New York. I'm not kidding. So yeah, we want IDs with your vaccine cards, but we don't want voter IDs to vote. Okay, whatever. All right, so that's the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. All right, second one is the Freedom to Vote Act. So this one would make Election Day a national holiday so that everyone could get off of work or have a chance of getting off to work to vote. Well, that's not too bad. 2 weeks of early voting. I mean, we do something like that here in Colorado. I mean, nothing bad there. Voting by mail, no excuses, with the ability to drop the ballots in drop boxes. I mean, we actually do that in Colorado if you have the right systems that are up to date, and not, say, like New York, that one district I pointed out right next coming up to the election, where what happened? They lost 50,000 votes, and it took them a couple of months after the election ended to finish counting the votes because they kept finding ballots in random storage closets and stuff. Yeah, if you don't have a system like that, that could work too. Next one, change in voting laws to assist the disabled. Voter IDs, if you're going to accept voter IDs, accept more than maybe just the official, like a driver's license or passport. Maybe give the ability to have additional types of IDs. Okay. Online same-day vote, online registration and same-day registration, same day as when you vote. We actually do that in Colorado here too. So, outlawing gerrymandering. So that one has to do with legislatures on both sides of the political fence can change the districts to try to, you might see a weird district with all sorts of weird boundaries, which essentially envelops all the people that the legislature wants to include, so that they can, shall we say, encourage, not encourage, what's the right word, so that they can kind of stack the deck in favor of a political party. That's gerrymandering. So they outlawing that. There are a lot of arguments for doing that. No argument there either. Limit ways states can purge people from voting rolls. Why does the state need to have that overseen? Again, if they're doing something funky, bring the lawsuit, slap the state with a lawsuit, and push back. But that's kind of the same thing as the pre-clearance for the DOJ in the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. That's kind of weird. Federal Election Commission has the ability to investigate campaign abuses, expanding that ability. I thought that's something they could do anyway. So, okay, so on the balance, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, that one just raises a whole lot of red flags. I don't like that. But the Freedom to Vote Act, there's a lot of stuff in there that, okay, a lot of states should probably do that. A lot of states already do it, actually. So here's the question. Maybe you think that this stuff should pass, and I think a lot of this stuff should pass too. But does this raise to the level of, if you don't pass it, then people of color don't have the ability to vote? Does this mean that, I was able to go vote last election? I didn't have anyone picking on me for being a black person. So, yeah, again, you could argue that we need some of this stuff, but does this raise up to the level of Jim Crow 2.0 or racism because you don't want to pass these two bills? I would say no. Maybe that's just me. All right, next up, new constitutional amendment in California in order to fund a single-pay healthcare system, looking at tax surcharges for incomes above $490,000 in income, which sounds like a lot of money, but in California, that's like, in California, especially San Francisco and Los Angeles, $150,000 is like $50,000 in most areas of the country. So that would hit a lot of people, far more than it sounds like it would hit. Payroll tax income for anyone who earns more than $50,000, which would definitely hit pretty much everyone. This would raise the marginal tax rate at the highest point to 18.05%. So nearly 1/5 of your income going to the state of California. The average tax rate in the rest of the country is 5.3%, by the way, in case you're wondering. So, another reason to move out of California? I don't know, maybe. Last up, just really quickly, this one really kind of annoyed me a little bit. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, in a recent speech, was quoted as saying that the U.S. economy, quote, has never worked fairly for black Americans or really for any American of color. never worked fairly. So, like, you've seen me post his stuff. Patrick Bet-David, he's the CEO of I think it was PEP Insurance. It's an insurance company. He is an Iranian immigrant. He immigrated from Iran. He went into the army. He did a lot of reading and education, and is now CEO of a really large company and is a millionaire. But I guess it didn't work fairly for him, huh? Winsome Sears, who is the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, immigrated from, I believe it was Jamaica, went into the Marines, opened up several businesses, and is now the first black Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. Guess it didn't work fairly for her either. What's another good example? Oh, the CEO of my company is a black female. The previous CEO of my company is a black male. Wow, guess the U.S. economy didn't work fairly for them either. What else? Me. I've more than doubled my income in the past few years. Yeah, that's the U.S. economy not working for me, folks, because I'm black and everything is racist against me and we need help. Now, that's not to say that there aren't a lot of areas where people do need help. The Native American nation, the Navajos, that's a big one where because they do not have, say, a lot of running water, they've been hit hard by COVID over the past 2 years. So there are examples of people who need help. There are examples of people who, you're stuck in the slums. Like for the past 2 years, you're stuck in the slums or you're stuck in inner city. Prices of rents and homes are going up too fast for you to be able to afford something. There are a lot of people who need help. There are a lot of people who need to break the bonds of poverty. But to say that's different from saying that the U.S. economy has never worked fairly for anyone who's a person of color. I get it. There are a lot of people who need help. They honestly do. But to say that, everything sucks for me because I'm black, or everything sucks for a person because they're an Indian or Asian. How many people do you know? How many stories have you heard of immigrants coming over, opening restaurants, and so forth? I had that story from the New York Times late last year, where it was in Wisconsin, where you had the first riots in Kenosha, and a good portion of the businesses that were burned were businesses owned by immigrants, not Native Americans, Asians, Middle Eastern, and so forth. Those were the businesses that were burned. So those were people who were building their businesses and getting ahead in life. So there are a lot of people who are taking advantage of what this economy has to offer. And to say that it's never worked fairly for anyone who's a person of color, again, there are a lot of cases and there are a lot of areas where, yes, people do need help. Yes, we do need to help people to educate themselves and escape from the bonds of poverty. But to say that the economy's never worked fully, as if all of us who are black, and it's the same thing with the voting rights legislation. If we don't pass this, one of our senators here in Colorado said, we need to make sure to pass this so that everyone has, he essentially said, we need to pass this so everyone has the right to vote. And half the comments were, everyone already has the right to vote. It's like if we don't pass the legislation, we're back in the 1950s. It's like, well, if the government doesn't do something, all black people and all people of color are going to be poor and nothing's working for them. No, that's not true. And unfortunately, now that it's midterms, you're going to see the same thing as with previous years. And this is something I noticed a couple of years ago, and even a couple of years ago before that. Now that it's election time and say a certain voter base needs to be mobilized, you're going to hear a lot more stuff about how black people are stuck in the 1950s and how we need to do all this stuff in order to help people of color. And it doesn't mean we actually need help. Yeah, some of us do. It doesn't mean we all are stuck in the 1950s. It's just because it's election season. So you're going to see, unfortunately, a lot more of that this coming year, especially if the voting rights legislation doesn't pass, which again, there's a lot of good stuff in at least one of the two bills. But to say we're back in the 1950s if we don't pass both of these is gaslighting. I'm sorry, it just is. So there you go. All right, y'all take care. Have a good Tuesday, and I will see y'all soon.